after Disney's death, the studio didn't have the stream of big hits that it used to. I mean, it had a big hit every once in a while, but for the most part, it never quite hit the Snow White standards. And on top of that, the films were just taking longer and longer and longer to make. So if the film didn't really wow audiences, people sort of felt they got gypped. And the film that many Disney fans call the crowning achievement of failure is The Black Cauldron. How bad is it? Well, for a movie that had a ton of money put into both the animation and the advertising, it failed to please audiences and critics alike, proving to be a gigantic financial failure. This film did so bad that on its opening weekend, it lost to the Care Bears movie. You heard right, a Disney film lost to the Care Bears movie. It was considered the lowest point in Disney history. So wow, this film must be really, really bad, right? Well, yeah. Despite the fact that it's starting to grow sort of a cult following, it really doesn't hold up that well. At least for my taste. What's the story? Well, it's about this teenage boy who wants to be a hero. The only problem is he's much more talk and much less do. And when I say talk, I mean really talk. I mean, this kid doesn't shut up.
Dorban doesn't understand. I'm not a little boy anymore. I should be doing heroic deeds for Prydain. Is this to be my life? Pampering a pig? I'm a warrior.
And I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it look like he's full of himself, but an innocent, and then when he enters the real world, he's gonna discover things about himself, blah, 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 blah. But I'm sorry, his voice is annoying. And on top of that, his ego is annoying. He barely does anything in this movie.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. But without the help of my pig Henwin here,
He just praises himself, and God, I want to smack him! Well, anyway, he's looking after this pig named Henwig, who has this very distinct power of whenever you put her head in a puddle of water, she can see the future. Isn't that weird? Well, apparently there's this evil demon known as the Horned King, and he wants possession of the pig so he can take her and look into the future to see if she can lead him to the Black Cauldron. What's the Black Cauldron? Apparently it's a device that can bring people back from the dead and create an invincible army. Along the way, he comes across a princess. Yeah, imagine, a princess in a Disney film. And I know I go on and on about princess rants, but really, there is absolutely no point to having her be a princess in this movie. Even by Disney standards, she doesn't do anything princessy. She doesn't wear fancy dresses, she doesn't give orders, she doesn't, I don't know, sing. We don't even see her kingdom. We don't even see her castle. We don't see anything that Disney loves to market when it comes to princesses. All she's got going for her is the name, so really there was no reason for it. There's also this really annoying comic relief that's sort of like a mix between oatmeal and a hairball. Yeah, you thought Jar Jar Binks' voice was annoying? Get a load of this.
Oh, poor miserable Gurgi deserves fierce smackings and whackings on his poor tender head.
Yeah, between these two characters' voices, I want to strangle this film. Even the music by the great Elmore Bernstein. All I hear throughout the entire thing is Ghostbusters. Listen. Tell me that doesn't sound like the Zool theme. Okay, so for all my bitching and moaning, is this really one of the worst Disney films of all time? Well, I don't know if I can go that far. I mean, it is annoying, but there is some creativity to the animation, though not much. And as frustrating as it can get, it never gets to a point where it says anything bad. I mean, I can't think of any bad messages or morals or anything. It's just sort of bland and forgettable, like a lot of the Disney films that were coming out at that time. It's not the worst, but it's definitely one of the lower ones. But like I said, the film's really starting to grow in fans, and I find more and more people actually sort of have this secret like for it. So maybe there is something there that can grab a certain group of people. But it certainly didn't grab me, and it certainly didn't grab a lot of audiences at the time. Black Cauldron is often called one of Disney's biggest failures. I think it's just kind of a bad movie. Not the worst, but I'd probably skip it. Great Mouse Detective. This is actually one of the first Disney films I ever saw in theaters. And when you're a little kid watching the magic of Disney on the big screen, this is exactly what you want to open up with.
Daddy! Where are you? Daddy! Daddy!
Mommy, that's scary as fuck! Well, after that, the movie is actually much more tame, at least not quite as creepy. The movie is about a little girl trying to get her father back. She comes across a mouse named Dawson, and they both come across a mouse named Basil of Baker Street, who's the rodent equivalent of Sherlock Holmes. In fact, he actually lives in Sherlock Holmes' house. They're off to not only find the little girl's father, but also stop an evil villain named Ratigan, played by Vincent Price. His plan is to have her father make a robotic queen so that he can replace her at some sort of ceremony where the robotic queen would then name him the ruler of the land. I don't know, it's for kids. Mice are running around, they can talk, you can get away with this shit, I guess. And anyway, that's not the focus of the movie. The focus of the movie is actually what it should be, the hero and the villain. The hero in this movie is great. He's this egotistical but still very likable character. He's energized, he's kooky, he's tenacious, he's a jerk sometimes, but he's got a good heart. It's all that great stuff you love in a hero. And on top of that, he's smart as hell. It's actually one of those few Disney films where you admire how intelligent the main character is. I mean, from beginning to end, you actually want to be smarter watching him. And then of course there's the villain, voiced by Vincent Price. What more do I have to say? It's Vincent Price, and he is loving every minute of it. He's egotistical, he's selfish, he sings, he prances around, he giggles. He just enjoys being nasty so much that it's hard not to enjoy it along with him. The two play off each other brilliantly. It's just these two gigantic, brilliant egos working off of one another. I usually find that with a celebrity voice, even the really good ones, you can often sort of feel them in the recording booth. Like, yeah, they're acting, but you know they're acting. You can see them saying their lines into the microphone. With Vincent Price, I never got that. He's just right there, in the role. It's Ratigan. Watch this movie again and tell me if you can really disconnect the recording of Vincent Price with the animation of the character. They're just flawless.
Oh, by the way, Basil, I just love your disguise. One would hardly recognize you.
They meld together perfectly. And while we're on the subject of the animation, that's pretty good too. I think this is actually the first time they started using computer graphics in an animated movie. And speaking of that, it makes for a great climax. There's a giant fight scene in the clock tower, and it's among one of Disney's best. The angles are great, the music builds, the pacing is wonderful, and we see Ratigan finally show his true colors. In fact, it gets pretty violent. I mean, there's no blood or anything, but there might as well be. The sound effects and everything really make it look like it hurts. But hey, when you're a little kid, that just sucked you in even more. The Great Mouse Detective is really smart, really delightful, and really fun. It is sort of your typical little mouse adventure where they just look at the big world and sort of create their own little world and you laugh and giggle at it. But like I said, what sets it apart from the other ones is the main character and the main villain. They're just a ton of fun to watch. I think it's one that often sneaks under the radar for most Disney fans, but it's definitely worth checking out. Find it on DVD and discover for yourself. Okay, so in all honesty, it's a little hard to talk about Oliver and Company without talking about another animated film that came out the exact same weekend, The Land Before Time. When I was a kid, Oliver and Company was the movie I wanted to see. I heard the Billy Joel songs, I saw the animation, I saw the cool dogs, I saw New York. It just looked like an awesome movie. But it was sold out at the time, and my folks could only get tickets to The Land Before Time. So I said, okay, well, I guess I can see that. And The Land Before Time, as most of you know, was a really great film. The animation was great, the story was great, and it was very Disney-esque. But we're not reviewing that, we're reviewing Oliver and Company, the film I really wanted to see as a little kid. So next week, we got our tickets, sat on down, and after Land Before Time, this was really underwhelming. I know it's weird saying that even as I'm an adult talking about this and reviewing it again, but the reason I bring it up is because The Land Before Time was much more like a Disney film than Oliver and Company was. It did a much better job teaching life lessons with really heavy scenes and, well, really memorable characters. Oliver and Company definitely seemed like a marketing tool. Even as a kid, I sort of felt manipulated by it. In fact, I actually remember enjoying the toys much more than I remember enjoying the movie. Yeah, I had a Cheech Marin dog, what about it? No, anyway, let's get to the actual story. It's the basic Oliver Twist story, except with animals. And it doesn't take place in the time of Charles Dickens, it takes place in modern-day New York City. Here, that sketchy drawn style actually has a little little bit more of a home. It sort of looks like an etching you'd see maybe in a New York store or a fine art store or something like that. In this version, Oliver isn't a boy, he's a kitten. And Dodger isn't a boy either, he's a dog. But not just a dog, a grown-up dog, voiced by Billy Joel. In terms of the Oliver story, I really find that distracting. I liked how Dodger and Oliver sort of had a connection, how they were sort of the same age, and blah 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 blah. If I'm gonna connect this to the original Oliver story, I'm gonna be really disappointed. There's really no point in setting it in modern day, or in New York, or with animals. So let's just ignore that for now and look at the story as it is. Oliver meets up with a bunch of tough dogs who are owned by this bum voiced by Dom DeLuise. He does dealings with this gangster, but not because he wants to, more because he just got himself in a bad situation. Much like Oliver Twist though, Oliver finds himself in the hands of a much nicer family, and he's constantly flip-flopping back and forth throughout the entire film. The nice family has a dog voiced by Bette Midler, and of course she gets a song.
Pretty is nice, but still, it's just pretty. Perfect, my dear, is me.
Eventually it ends up in this kind of complicated story about kidnapping the little girl, and now Oliver and the gang have to go save her. I guess it leads to kind of a neat climax, and actually one of the best villain deaths ever. I literally remember nothing about this villain except how he dies. Watch this. That is awesome. Aside from that, the movie only has a few things to offer. One is that goddamn catchy song, and it is catchy. You'll be humming it all day once you watch this review.
Why should I worry? Tell me, why should I care? Say I may not have a dime, oh, but I got free sour man.
But surprisingly, I don't think the other songs are very catchy. I think they just had this one big hit and they just exploited it like mad. I do remember Cheech Marin as the Chihuahua, and yeah, he gets a funny line every once in a while. It's funny thinking he'd come back as a hyena a few years later. And actually, I really do like the way they portray New York. After finally having been there, I gotta say, it's pretty close to accurate. It's big, but it's tight. There's a lot of attitude, but there's a lot of character, too. From an animation point of view, I think they got it down spot on. But aside from that, it's surprisingly forgettable. I don't remember too many of the characters, and like I said, the songs don't really leave you humming much, except for the one. And yeah, for Disney to do a version of Oliver, I sort of expected a lot more than this. At least for it to make a bigger impact. But again, it's not awful. It's just strange thinking that the non-Disney film at the time was turning out the much better Disney product. If you're an animal person, maybe you'll get into some of the cutesiness of it, but aside from that, it's nothing to scream about. But let's face it, this was just the film to tide us over before the next gigantic hit.
Oh, qué querido, ¿cómo se llama?
Zool, motherfucker, Zool!